Okay, so time to start again for the closing session of today's webinar. So we will have, as I said, three more presentations and then the final summaries of the breakouts from the rapporteurs. I would like to start with the first presentation by Maris Stulgis from the European Commission DG Mare.
Yes, hello everyone. Yeah, I see that you heard me. Yeah, first of all, congratulations to the organizers for such a dynamic, full of information and timely webinar. So this is really useful. So the next slide, please. So the EU is looking to launch a major EU initiative to really unlock the algae potential in the European Union. And this is not the work from the scratch. This really follows the Blue Bioeconomy Forum roadmap recommendations launched end of the 19 and also follows the policy research and the information that are compiled in the Blue Bioeconomy Forum reports, in the annual Blue Economy reports, and also from policy analysis and research and input received from various stakeholders. And this also contributes to the European Green Deal, where in particular the Farm to Fork strategy indicates that there should be a targeted support to the algae industry, and that algae is considered as an important alternative protein source. So this EU algae initiative is considered to be the European Commission communication, and it's scheduled for the first half of 22. What has been done so far, there was already open public consultation on the roadmap of that initiative that ended 18 January, and we received 79 useful and mostly positive contributions. At the moment, mid of February, we launched the impact assessment study to really look at the specific policy options and the specific needs really to be performed at the EU level, where the EU can bring added value on the EU level. And that impact assessment will include targeted stakeholder interviews. It will include 5 webinars organized around the 5 objectives that I will mention in a second. And there will be also open public consultation taking place for 3 months, supposedly to be launched within the next month. Next slide, please. So the initiative aims at increasing the sustainable production, ensures safe consumption, and boosts innovative use of algae and algae-based products in Europe. And initially it includes 3 options, like usually option 1 is a baseline option. Then option 2 is to looking at the targeted activities to support the sustainable growth of the algae sector, and includes 5 objectives, like number 1 is improving governance framework, to look at the different guidelines or standardization recommendations needed. Number 2 is to support the functioning of the market, looking at the novel algae species for food and other applications, and the necessary funding mechanisms. Next slide, please. Improving the business environment, to looking at the specific funding and needs, one-stop shop assistance mechanism, increasing social awareness and acceptance, for instance, communication campaigns, labeling, inclusion into the maritime spatial planning processes, like for instance, DG Mare has launched the Taste the Ocean campaign to promote the sustainable seafood with 9 well-known European chefs, and also the monthly awareness raising TV episodes in Euronews called Oceans, that you maybe have seen, and in October one was promoting the seaweed production, and also looking at the needs for closing knowledge, research and innovation gaps. And this also is to looking at various aspects. And then the option 3 is to look at the necessary regulatory measures. So this is not, as you already noticed, that my colleagues from DG Grow and DG Environment, they are also contributing from various aspects, and this is this is a very collaborative file, and we are working together on it. And yes, and this looks at the various applications, including the bioremediation potential of algae, and the use of algae as a fertilizers or biomaterials. And maybe just the last thing to, so my time is up. Yeah, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Maris. Very interesting presentation. I'll be curious also to watch the documentary on Euronews later. I was not aware of that. So we can now move to the second presentation of this session. Paul Foronjan from International Lemne Association, and I think we have a video for this. So just hold on a second, the video will start.
Hello everyone, I'm Paul Foronjan, the Executive Director of the International Lemne Association, a nonprofit aimed at accelerating duckweed research and applications. The duckweed or Lemnaceae family are 5 genera and 36 species of the smallest and fastest growing flowering plants that are found around the world. Their biomass is 95% water by fresh weight, and that 5% dry matter is protein-rich in high nitrogen conditions, as well as starch-rich in nitrogen deprivation conditions. Wastewater treatment pilot plants in Bangladesh, as well as Chengdu, China, saw yields of 13 to 38 dry tons per hectare per year, depending on the month. And compared to algae, they're easier to harvest because of their size. They're even large enough for livestock to eat directly, which could reduce CapEx and OpEx costs, especially in smaller treatment facilities. Inamin is a company in Israel growing duckweed on formulated media in automated greenhouses to produce a vegetable for human consumption. Similarly, Plantable Foods in California produces a protein isolate as an egg white substitute that can be used in vegan products such as burgers to brownies to improve the texture. Drygrow grows lemna as a high yield and water efficient replacement for soybean meal and animal feed in Kenya. And finally, Mama Grande grew hundreds of tons of duckweed in water treatment lagoons in Argentina. Water quality is the single largest factor in determining the safety of the duckweed biomass and its downstream applications. Duckweed intentionally grown on various effluents can meet the U.S. safety standards for feed, fertilizer, and fuel, as broadly shown here. Every year, there are hundreds of academic papers published on this topic, including several by European universities, including Finn and Johannes at Osnabrück, who are studying pig manure effluent as a potential animal feed. Of course, there's a large number of safety concerns using duckweed grown on wastewater for any of these downstream applications. Heavy metals are, of course, always tested to ensure they're under the legal limits of whatever application is used. And there's even a company, Aquacaligo, in Australia, using duckweed as a phytomining tool. The duckweed treatment lagoons are shown to degrade hormones such as estrogen and even kill off many of the pathogenic bacteria, although you'll always want to do a sterilization step. Finally, we've seen that duckweed can capture microplastics as well as nanoparticles from the water column and degrade chemicals such as phenol before being converted into carbon-neutral biofuels. Of course, we do not want to test all of these processes and make sure that they're safe, and this is where pilot plants come into play. This farm near Cork, Ireland is being studied by the Janssen Lab, and this duckweed is grown to accumulate the ammonia, as well as provide animal feed for those 4 aquaculture ponds. Similarly, this schematic is a water treatment plant designed by Paul Stillcorn to meet and exceed U.S. discharge limits, as well as fertilize a aquaculture facility using duckweed as its biomass. Now, we believe that treatment pilot plants such as these, using real wastewater in local climates in long-term studies, are the most accurate method of testing the safety of biomass for downstream applications. Thank you so much for all the scientists who made this presentation possible, and thank you as well for listening in. Looking forward to Reindrik's presentation next and our discussion session together. Thanks.
Thank you for this nice video, and of course Paul is here, so it would be, you can address questions to him in the chat window. It is a very interesting branch or niche of this larger, wider algae sector. So we move now to the third presentation by Reindert Devlamink from Inagro.
Thank you. Thank you for the interesting.
I spelled it your name correctly. Apologies if I didn't.
It's spelled correctly. Thank you. Also, thank you for giving us here this platform and all these interesting presentations. I think we also like to have the opportunity to introduce you to duckweed and see the similarities with the EU algae policy. And we also want to reach out for collaborations in the future. My name is dus Reindert Vlaming. I'm the lead researcher of the duckweed investigation in Inagro. Inagro is a research center in which we translate practical research towards the farmer to really give advice in a Flemish context, so Flanders, Belgium. And yeah, here you see already duckweed, but I would like to proceed to the following slides, if possible. I would like to introduce you first to how the reference is done here in Flanders. So we have raw manure, which is normally treated into a solid and liquid fraction by centrifugation step, and furthermore it is then nitrified and denitrified in a biological treatment. And then this effluent can be applied to arable land. This could be crops like maize and grass. But there are some limits, of course. For example, the effluent should be applied to the plant before sowing or at an early stage, and it should be applied to the ground. So there's a physical and a time barrier for the manure to become into the plant and into the feed again. But what we would like to propose is using this biological treatment effluent for the growth of duckweed, because it actually, I see a quick question, the solid fraction is further transported and exported to it's phosphor rich and as a manure, but I will not answer questions. I will go to the presentation. We have 3 minutes. The advantage is that you grow it in a soil that is covered with a foil, so there's no interaction with the groundwater, so it prevents leaching, and it grows very fast, like Paul mentioned before. And we can reach up productivities of 3.8 ton proteins per hectare per year, and even higher if you have more ideal circumstances. But can you go to the next slide, please? So then this could be done in this pilot scale that we have executed for the last 3 years. So that the duckweed grows on top of the water, wastewater, and you add a dark liquid fraction, so a wastewater, but of course diluted for meeting the growing criteria of duckweed. So this is a visual presentation of how it can be done. But of course, if we go to the next slide, you will see that there are the same remaining challenge for the algae. It can be guaranteed the safety and can it be done legally? there can also be physical barriers or other barriers needed for allowing this. And for example, we can add a heat treatment to the manure or just by digesting it. But also the plant can be washed or even bleached or even be washed with an acid to minimize all risks. But of course, we are also asking the question as a researcher, what will be the necessities? What are the requirements and which treatments are all needed for guaranteeing it? And we are investigating these aspects. Nevertheless, if it's animal manure or not, duckweed should also comply all the feed legislations. So we look into the, well, the first thing that should be in order is that it is registered on the feed registered material, which is the case for duckweed. So that's already a plus. But you now also need, to guarantee safety. So if we look then to, for example, the legislations of feed ingredients, then we should supply with all the legal limits. And this is on the next slide. We have already some preliminary results of, for example, arsenic, cadmium, and lead concentrations of duckweed grown on pig manure for a period of time. So we have already some indications, but at least the more info is in the paper that will be published. But at least this shows that it is a possibility to meet the criteria of these metals. But on the next slide, you will see that there are also more concerns to be addressed. So we are actually reaching out to people here to help us perhaps analyze this stuff and also identify what are potential harms. So the reference that I use here are from Marco et al. Perhaps some of you know it, because it also contains it's a review on what should be analyzed on agro-industrial wastes for the cultivation of microalgae and duckweed. So perhaps it's also known by you, but it also includes viruses, parasites, bacteria, but also, for example, the animals can eat or are treated with medicines like antibiotics, parasiticides, or even some hormones that can end up in the manure. So what does the duckweed do with that? So these are still research questions open, and that's our approach, that we believe we should be sure of the safety, but then perhaps it can be allowed as feed after animal manure treatment. If you go to the next slide, then I can conclude.
Out of time. You have to.
It's just a conclusion. So what I was want to repeat again, that we at Inagro are also working with duckweed, and we are reaching out for collaborations. And please contact me by email, Reiner.Inagro. And the only thing left here to say is then thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Reiner. Thank you. And I see that there are, of course, questions in the chat window for you. So keep an eye on that. Mm-hmm. So with this, we conclude this long list of very, very interesting technical presentations. And I would like to thank all the speakers for providing the slides and for keeping their time. I think we can now introduce move closer to the end of the session and introduce the rapporteurs, providing some summaries of the breakouts. So I think the first rapporteurs will report on the first technical session. So I would like to invite Marie, Edith, and Aurora to provide some summaries of the first technical session.
Okay, thank you very much. The Emscher Genossenschaft and Lieferverband, for which I work for, is a large water board in Germany, but is not directly involved in algae processes and use. So I do this rapport in a quite neutral view through the Phos4U project, which we are lead partner of, and one of the partner, Anya, presenting before, activities done in Algae. So the session on the fertilizer regulation went on the different aspects and barriers that the European fertilizing product regulation still have in it for the valorization of algae. So I will say that first, the different participants really show that there are a huge amount of processes using algae that have already been proved to be successful in different demonstrations, which have been small demonstration, but also already quite large demonstration. For example, for the treatment of wastewater with the large pond in Andalusia, or as well for the valorization of bio-waste through algae treatment. There is a lot of positive aspects given for those processes, such as a positive energy balance, the production of biofuel, the production of biofertilizer as a result of the byproduct produced, but also some useful help for carbon sequestration. But at the same time, there was some kind of remark, is that more marketing than efficacy? And here, for example, for the carbon sequestration, there was some remark that some more search on the real carbon footprint may be needed. Also for the cost efficiency, there is often not the efficiency already there, but it's also meant that the algae sector is kind of in the first stage of development. And of course, at the demonstration scale, there is never a cost efficiency, but there is a need to maybe for further incentives and political support to upscale the different processes. Then when we go to the product coming out of the algae process, it's mostly not the initial motivation to have this product or byproduct, but anyhow, the biomass produced with algae presents interesting properties. Here, there is the discussion underlying that there is definitely a need to improve the demonstration of the value chain, a need to improve the demonstration of the pathway to make use of this valuable biomass. And in that case, the whole value chain need to be considered. Biomass from algae find application mainly in animal feed and in fertilizing product, well, at least in this discussion. And it was underlined that the algae for animal feed give more value in terms of added value rather than when the algae biomass is used for fertilizing product. So now I go through the different aspects discussed really regarding the fertilizing product. We had a very clear presentation from the European Commission presenting that providing all requirements on CMC are required. The final use of the algae biomass can be at least in three categories, in three product function categories, either as fertilizer, well, mainly organic fertilizer, or as soil improver, or as plant biostimulant. And to be able to use those biomass, those algae biomass in those PFC, the algae biomass need to reach the criteria of the CMC, of the compound material categories. And there were discussion on the different category that have been presented. The first one, okay, I'm out of time, but I will go on because now it's really the point where the requirements have been discussed. For the CMC one, the category is basically not applicable. But this is possible if the waste on which the algae have grown up has been declared as non-waste or has reached the end of waste status. And here there was a discussion that there are different approaches in the different member states, and it is up to the producer of the algae to obtain the end of waste status. So as the national regulation to reach the end of waste might be different, there is here a need for harmonization. But I think this point has been already treated by Caroline Attard in the next presentation, which is dealing exactly with that point. The category CMC number 2, which is about the plants, is basically applicable for algae. Here we had the 2 points that have been discussed. The first one is about the cyanobacteria, which are excluded from the CMC. And here there are 2 points of view to reach the European Commission in revising this point and maybe including the cyanobacteria under this CMC. Either there is a call to the industry to provide scientific evidence that there is a market interest and that the algae is safe, or there was another comment saying that cyanobacteria are already consumed all over the world, and maybe the European Commission and policymaker should just look at evidence, what is really done throughout the world. And also it was noted that it's probably better to have the cyanobacteria as intentionally grown algae rather than as cyanobacteria which develop together with other grown algae, which is worse. For the CMC number 7, there is by time no algae in the positive list of the species allowed, whereas this is conditioning the application of the algae to be considered as a plant biostimulant. So here there would be a call to the European Commission to add some different species of microalgae, but here then there is a need, and I think the commissions show that they are open for that, but scientific evidence need to be provided. Further on, the CMC 3, 4, 5 are applicable in case the end of waste status is reached. And it was also clearly noted again that CMC 4 exclude the cyanobacteria. The CMC 11, which is about byproduct, is not currently under the focus of the European Commission. And with the new category, sewage sludge ashes and pyrolysis materials, which are going to be number 13 and 14, if I understood well, they can use algae as input product to produce those materials. So there is no specific algae CMC, but the algae entered in a large range of CMC, and I would conclude here. Thank you.
Thank you for this really insightful and very good summary of the first technical session. So I will now ask the rapporteurs of the second technical session to provide their summary. Thomas or Renske?
Thank you. So I will take the word, but Renske, of course, helped me in making the concluding remarks. But I have to say that the previous report was so thorough that I don't need to add that much anymore, but I will try anyway. So first of all, thank you for this very interesting webinar. So I'm Thomas van Ecke from Flemish Coordination Center of Manual Processing, and Renske Verhulst is from the Dutch Nutrient Platform. So as you see, it's a rather new world, a whole new world for us, this algae culture on waste. But I think we had a very interesting webinar, and we saw a lot of different interesting technological advances. And as so much things that also happen in other sectors, we see that the technical transition is faster than the changing legislation. So, and that legislation is not only on European level, but also on national level, because in the slides from Caroline, we saw that the national competent authorities have an important task to do in defining the end of waste criteria. So the member states will also have a role in all this. But of course, the stakeholders, the producers of products, the inventors of technologies and so forth will also have a role in this. They will be asked to give more information on the products that they produce to the national competent authorities in that way that they will be able to help to change the European legislation. So, but I tried to summarize, and I think that cultivating algae or duckweed, as we saw in the last presentation, have different objectives, and then the way it's done, that they all will determine the status and the safety of the products. First of all, if you want to cultivate algae for phytoremediation, or do you want to do it for CO2 abatement, or for nitrogen, phosphorus recovery, or to produce a specific product? That's the first question. Then, how will you do it? Which substrate will be used? What is the status of that substrate? Is it waste? Is it manure? What is its composition, and so on? And also interesting, I found, from the manure perspective that I have, I always think about nitrogen, phosphorus, maybe a bit water, but never about the CO2. But here it became clear that the CO2 that is used to grow the algae is also seen as a resource that has a certain status. It's important to know where the CO2 is coming from. And then the use. The product can be used for food, feed, in agriculture as fertilizer, or to make fuels, chemicals, and so on. So it is important to look at this. Of course, determine the way it wants to be used will determine how safe it needs to be. And it is also very important to think about the other streams that are produced during the process. Sometimes you have solids that are produced, for example, the separation to a liquid that is being used to grow the algae or the duckweed on. But you have also a watery substance that is left over. What will you do with it? Which status has it? And as the previous reporter also mentioned, all this is covered with a source of cost efficiency. It will only be done if it is really cost efficient. So some points that I wanted to add in this report. First of all, as in several other things also in other sectors, it's also important to think about the fact, is it the substrate or what it is grown on that will determine the status of the product, or is it how is it? Is it safe? Which parameters or criteria will be used for that? These end of waste criteria, for example, it will be a very important role for stakeholders and the national competent authorities to give the information Europe needed. And I think we can call for collaboration in this, that it is very important to collaborate between the different member states to know what information that will be going to Europe. And it is also important to check if there is any member state already having some reference legislation that can be used as basis. We saw also in the second presentation of the second technical session that there was the question, which parameters are important? When is a product safe? So I think it will be on heavy metals, xenobiotics, pathogens, but what are the criteria for these? From my perspective, I also want to add some more words on manure. And so, of course, what will happen if you grow these algae or duckweed on manure in the status, because this manure status is another story apart, I think, but it's also an important one. The previous reporter also mentioned the cyanobacteria. So even if they are in accidental presence, they will play a role, it seems, for the fertilizing product regulation. And I think, yeah, the last presentations also show that duckweed has actually the same problems or issues with status as the algae. So that were my words. I don't know if Renske wants to add something more on this. No, it's okay, it seems. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you, and congratulations to all the rapporteurs, because they were really effective in summing up things. So I think now, sorry, I didn't have my video on. Thanks to all the rapporteurs. We are now the last comments and the last remarks of this webinar. It was the first time I had the opportunity to organize and to moderate a webinar together with the ESPP, and I'm really pleased to see that there was a really very good list of presentations and very stimulating discussion. You will certainly hear from us soon with the slides and the recordings. I think now we can leave the final remarks to Ludwig, and I think he wanted also to show this slide.
Yes, definitely. So thank you very much to everybody who has contributed to this very dense, very inspiring webinar. And the webinar, as I mentioned already at the beginning, was not to give answers. It was to, let's say, categorize areas to which we can add in terms of questions, in terms of findings, in terms of research. And we have heard quite a lot of contributions that have highlighted, emphasized the areas that need research and need answers. So we were not expecting answers for today, but we were expecting subjects on which to work and to raise questions. And we present this slide here because Pierre-Olivier has really made some exercise in highlighting the areas that can be, let's say, starting materials for algae production. And we have, of course, gaseous materials, and we have liquid materials and solid materials. And probably we have to distinguish in our further exercises, in our further research, between these origins, because if we think about risk, about safety, of course, the separation will play an important role, and the cleanness of the project, of the product and of the extraction process, so the precision of the extraction process, and of course, a separation via a gaseous phase has different challenges and questions as a separation from a liquid or from a solid phase. So all this needs to be taken into consideration, and I think this slide here gives us a starting point from which we can develop the different perspectives. And of course, on one hand, we have the sources, and on the other hand, we have the products, and you may have produced algae as products or as precursors of products. And again, this may raise different questions in terms of safety and in terms of regulatory challenges. So I think this is the overall conclusion from our webinar. Thank you very much again. And I give now the floor back to Maurizio. Thank you also, Maurizio, for organizing and for helping us in organizing this webinar.
Thanks to you. And thanks to all the panelists and speakers and the attendees for being with us. I think we still have, we are right on time, so we still have some minutes left in case there are any last minute comments or questions from the panelists and the speakers. Chris, do you think there is something else to be addressed?
Not myself, but maybe if some of the panelists or speakers have input to make.
I see Peter, maybe.
Yeah, thank you very much. As you mentioned, I work for WETSIS and also active in the European platform Water Europe. And within Water Europe, we've put to the attention of the European Commission that it would be very interesting to have end of waste criteria specifically for products and resources derived from wastewater treatment, possibly from the sludge part, etc. But given this discussion of today, it's quite similar with products grown on wastewater, such as in the discussion duckweed, algae, and such. So we are already engaged with the Commission, and we would like to see indeed some development in that area, especially with DG Environment that is shortlisting several sectors. Through European Parliament as such, of course, you end up mostly in e-waste and building material and plastics and packaging, because these for the consumer might be more visible. But of course, on a daily basis, all of us are actually producing our regular fair share of wastewater. And although we don't see it anymore when we flush the toilet, it's super important. And of course, one of the main elements being phosphate and the condition that it's one of the rare earths in Europe. So yeah, this remains important, and we look forward to collaborate with ESPP and more partners in this session, and with DG Environment to make this a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And I see in the meantime, John maybe wanted to add some final words.
Just a very final comment on this, that we are living, and we have to live in a circular economy. It's a big challenge, both technology-wise and politically. I think that we cannot make artificial segregation between what is waste, what is not waste. We all live in waste. We all live in our own waste, from the CO2 we breathe in every hour to all the water that we drink. So we have to basically not be saying that there is waste and not waste. We have to see what the particular details are for each case. And so I think the European Union, both on the economic and technology research side, has a big challenge to be able to really close the gap, in particular for phosphorus, which is a topic today, but also for the other nutrients, water and elements. Thank you. And by the way, this applies also to the United States, of course, and the rest of the world.
Thank you. Thank you, John. And I would like to thank you. Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, John. And I would like to thank you in particular for staying with us from the West Coast of the US during nighttime for you. So it was we really appreciate this. I think we now have to close unless we have any other final remarks from any other panelists. Chris, do you have any final words? If not, I think we can close the webinar. Thanks again to all the participants for being with us all the morning. You will receive a notification from us when the slides and the video will be available. I hope you had opportunity to learn as much as I did this morning, and please feel free to connect to us and among you, and see you the next event organized by ESPP and the ABA, and enjoy your lunch. Bye.